So without further ado, let's go to my interview with G. Edward Griffin. Ed Griffin, welcome to the Ron Paul Powercast from your home in California. Looking at the election season this time around, 2012, are there any candidates that specifically stand out for you that sort of carry your message forward?
Well, Gary, first of all, thanks for inviting me on the show. But secondly, your question is an easy one because there's only one candidate out there, as far as I'm concerned, that really can win for America. I said for America. Other candidates can win for their political party or win for their corporate sponsors or win for their ideological mentors and all of that. But Ron Paul is the candidate that I see, the only candidate that I could feel comfortable endorsing and voting for. And as I said, he's the only candidate that can win for America.
Well, speaking of a winning strategy, I know that John King just recently said on CNN, after he interviewed Ron Paul during the Arizona debate, that Ron Paul is currently, according to them, carrying second place with delegates. How do you feel about that as a strategy? You know, we see the horse race taking place with, jockeying for positions with primary wins and caucus wins, and everyone's like, oh, first place, second place, third place, but the real race comes down to the delegate strategy. What is your thought on that specific angle to go for the win?
Well, you're absolutely right, Gary. All of the media attention is on winning the debate, as though winning a debate really means anything at any level, except if you're on a debate team. Then you want the trophy, of course. But this is not, we're not fighting for a trophy here. We're trying to save America and restore America. And it takes more than just the audience voting and saying, well, I like this guy because he seemed to really have the best answers or he did best in the debate. So the point I'm leading up to is the one you've already made, which is that the only thing that matters in these caucuses is how many delegates the candidates are securing at the end of the caucus. And it's something that you never hear mentioned, or hardly ever hear mentioned in the mainstream media. And the fact of the matter is that the winner, so-called announced winner of the debates, is not always the person that walks away with the most delegates, which means he's got these committed votes when it comes time to go to the national convention. He's got votes in his pocket. And whether he got a high score in the debate really isn't too important. And so I'm really happy to see that Ron Paul is at least in second place. And I suspect maybe even in first place if we knew all of the intricacies behind the scenes. In any event, Ron Paul is either first or second place in securing debates. And so he is a major contender in the coming nominations.
Now let's talk about some of Ron Paul's points. Are there any specific points of Ron Paul's message that resonate with you specifically?
Oh, yes. Almost everything that Dr. Paul talks about resonates with me. But when I sort of stand back and look at what's going on in America, to me, the two most major issues are, one, the loss of American sovereignty. The fact that for many decades now, piece by piece, year by year, the leaders of both major political parties have been participating in the surrender of American sovereignty, bit by bit. A piece of legislation here, a Supreme Court decision there, a United Nations treaty here, participation in what they call harmonization strategies with other countries and so forth. And when you stand back and look at that, you realize that these people are just chopping away, branch at a time, that beautiful tree of American sovereignty, to the point where we're practically at the state of not being a nation anymore. Probably the last stage in that, and we see looming right now, is when leaders of both political parties are anxiously trying to bring about a new international currency. I mean, we're going to phase out the American dollar, they say. The American dollar is in trouble. So what's the solution? Not to go back to a sound money and strengthen the American dollar. Their solution is, let's abandon the American dollar and adopt an international monetary system of some kind, which will be, of course, no different than the one we now have, except it'll be beyond the control of Americans. And that's what I'm leading up to, which is the two cornerstones of national sovereignty are military power and your own monetary system. Well, if they take the monetary system from America, then America really, by definition, is no longer a nation. So there's one of the major issues, as far as I can see, that's been going on for many years. And the other one, of course, is our monetary system itself being based on this fractional reserve system and being controlled by a private banking cartel called the Federal Reserve System. And they've just used the monetary system as a form of legalized plunder of the American people with all of these bailouts and these massive loans they've made. This is all for the banks, of the banks. You know, the nation has literally been captured by the financial fraternity. And that, to me, is the second major issue. And how many candidates on either side of the aisle are talking about either one of those? Basically, one, and that's Ron Paul.
So you're talking about the fiat banking system. You see that we're moving towards a global fiat banking system.
Absolutely.
And based on, because I can look back in my short life and see a speeding up, an amping up, a higher frequency of the loss of sovereignty and all these things taking place. I mean, just in the past 5 years, we've seen a substantial increase in these events, these global events and these breakdowns of the economy and such. Do you see a timeline as well, a projected time in the future where we might see a fiat global dollar? Is there a number in how many years you think we are out from such a thing?
Well, that's a question that, of course, is on everyone's mind, including mine. And I've often wondered how much time we have left to turn this thing around. And I'm pretty bad at making predictions when it comes to deadlines and timelines. I've always thought that it was just around the corner. And when I first became aware of these trends and events way back in the 1960s, I can remember thinking at that time, toward the end of the 1960s, boy, we've only got a few more years to go before this thing is over. Well, so much for my judgment of the resilience of the American economy. It has an amazing ability to sustain prolonged attack, which I didn't fully appreciate. But I do know that even though that I can't predict a date, and I don't think anybody can, I do know that it's coming. You know, I was reminded that the farmers up in the northern border of the United States, up along the edge of Canada, they know that about every 6 or 7 years there's a big blizzard that comes along. They don't know which year it's going to be, but they know it's coming. And they just, instead of saying, well, I think it's going to be this year or the next year, they just prepare for it so that they're ready no matter when it comes. It might even come 2 years in a row. And I've often thought about that because I don't think it's necessary to get too fixed on exactly the date that this event is going to happen and the transfer to an international fiat currency. We know it's coming, and it's very close. And you can tell just by reading between the lines in the major media, every time they talk about some international event where the bankers and the politicians meet, whether it's in Switzerland or whether it's in Germany or London or Paris or wherever, they all get behind closed doors, and when they come out, they say, well, we can't talk too much about it. But one of the things we all agree on is that we do need an international monetary system, and we're working now, they'll tell us, on how to bring that about. So there is absolutely no resistance to it at the highest levels of governments around the world, and certainly no resistance to it within our own government here in the United States. So we know it's coming, and when it comes, we don't know, but we know it's very, very close.
Well, I want to make sure that I plug your book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, an excellent read and a breakdown of the Federal Reserve and the fiat banking system, a must-read for all Americans out there. And you're talking about what takes place behind these closed doors. Do you feel that there's a level of arrogance that is seeping into world leaders today that wasn't there years ago?
That's a good question. I have always sensed that, Gary. I felt that these people were so confident of their power that they were arrogant. They completely ignore the will of the people that supposedly they represent. They go through the motions of, pretending to be concerned, but I've always sensed this arrogancy about them. Their concept is, we've talked about it before. They believe in collectivism, which is the idea that governments should be run from the top down and not from the bottom up, and that the leaders of all nations and the leaders of the world should determine what is best for the people for their own good, because they're too dumb to figure it out for themselves. And so it's their obligation to rule the masses, and they just take it on as sort of an obligation. It's their role, and we should be grateful for it. I've always sensed that.
Well, now
your point is still taken, though. It's so much more out in the open now because the issues are bigger and the events are moving more rapidly.
Now, you have some solutions to those problems, such as your Freedom Force International is one, and also the Project City Hall. Could you give us a brief summary of each of those?
Yes, I know we don't have a lot of time, and to summarize those is pretty hard. But anyway, I'll try my best. Freedom Force International is as the word suggests, it's an international group. It's a network of people. It's a movement all around the world. We have people in it in 68 countries now, and their role simply is to recapture the political systems where they live. All around the world, people have pretty much the same problem. It's the growth of collectivism, this arrogancy of government that we were just talking about. And we have a plan to reverse that and to take back the power centers of society. And instead of complaining to our leaders about the things they're doing wrong, our plan is to become the leaders of the next generation. And anybody that thinks that's a good idea, I invite them to come to our website, which is freedomforceinternational.org, freedomforceinternational.org, and I think they'll like what they see there. Now, an example of that strategy of becoming leaders in our own systems, we have in the United States a project in Freedom Force called Project City Hall. And it's based on an unofficial slogan that we have, which goes like this. The slogan is, you can't fight City Hall, but you can become City Hall. And that says it in a nutshell. Instead of complaining about what our elected representatives are doing, why don't we run for office or find somebody that we can support, get them to run for office, so we're no longer on the outside of the halls of power, we're on the inside. And Freedom Force has prepared a study program, training program, to show anyone how to run for political office of some kind. I'm not talking about President of the United States. We believe that we have to start at the grassroots level. Right now, our project is actively showing people how to become delegates in the political parties of their choice. In many states right now, you could go down and in a few days, you can be on the ballot. It might cost you $12. And you might need 5 signatures or something like that. But anybody can get on the ballot and become a delegate to the political party of their choice. These delegates are the ones that are going to go to the conventions and vote for the candidates. This is power, and people have ignored it. We're having people running for the Board of Supervisors in their county. We have several members who have already succeeded. They're now they're legislators in their county. They're in the House of Representatives. This is what we believe is the only path to taking back the system, not revolution and guns on the street, but working through the system and recapturing those power centers. And then it might take a little while. It's not going to happen by 2012, but it will happen certainly within a generation. So those are the plans. And if anybody wants to just quit complaining about it and become active and to recapture the power centers, come to freedomforceinternational.org and be sure to look up that little box on the side that says Project City Hall. And if that is too difficult, just go to Google and type in either one, Freedom Force International or Project City Hall, and you'll be there.
Now, we've only got about 60 seconds left, and I did want to just mention your Reality Zone newsletters. How can people get subscribe to those?
Oh, thanks for that, Gary. Yeah, just come, again, go to Google and type in Unfiltered News. That's the name of our free newsletter, and it goes out every week. In fact, I'll be working on it for the rest of tonight, and the issue will be published tomorrow. It's a great little newsletter. I personally spend a lot of time on it, and we're getting tremendous feedback from it. So the title of it again, look it up. It's Unfiltered News.
All right, Ed, thanks again for joining us on the Ron Paul Powercast. And everyone at home, make sure you get the Unfiltered News. You go and get the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. and educate yourself on the delegate process, Project City Hall, Freedom Force International. Ed Griffin, thanks for joining us.
Gary, thanks